Hello, everybody. This is Carol Maletta. Welcome to the Parenting 411 podcast, where we share information parents need from sources they can trust. As the mother of two, I can absolutely attest that babies are delightful and fascinating. We fuss over them, and it feels so good to be needed by them. And one area that we fret about right away is feeding. We're told over and over that breast is best. So right there in the hospital or whatever birthing location, we are urged to get our newborn started. We're teaching them to latch on. Moms can feel pressure to make that work. I know I did. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And whether you go with breastfeeding or formula, there's the question of how much babies should be fed and how often. You can be looking at 1 or 2 ounces every 2 to 3 hours for newborns, or up to 8 ounces every 4 to 5 hours for 6-month-olds. It's a lot. I mean, I even had twins, so it's quite a job. But that's why I'm glad that we get to hear from someone who's answering the call for support of mothers who are just trying to keep their babies fed at home and on the job outside of the home. So she is Andrea Ippolito, CEO and founder of SimplyFed, a virtual baby feeding support platform. She previously was a faculty member at Cornell University, Presidential Innovation Fellow based out of the White House during the Obama administration, and co-founder of Smart Scheduling, which was acquired by Athena Health. She is also mom to 2 adorable little ones. So now we can be sure she knows what she's talking about. Welcome, Andrea Ippolito.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yes. So, you have a very interesting background. I mean, in science and engineering. So, was it always your plan to use it in the healthcare industry?
So I am super lucky that I'm the daughter of 2 engineers. My mom is an electrical engineer. Fun fact, she was part of the team that designed the first female astronaut shuttle suits. And so I grew up with this very strong engineering presence in my life, which I feel incredibly lucky to have had those amazing role models in my life. And thanks to those role models, they really allowed me to explore. And one of the things that in high school I came upon was biomedical engineering. And so from a young age, I wanted to make change in engineering and healthcare, but I didn't know exactly what it looked like. But I could have never imagined. I thought I was going to be, making medical devices, these types of things, which is oh so important and game changing. But what I learned that I loved along the way is thinking about how do we change systems along the way in collaboration with those that came before you and those that are the leaders and on the front line of this. And I think that's so important that you need to work together within the existing system in order to redesign it or transform it to best meet patients' needs. Mm-hmm. So wanted to be in healthcare and the biomedicine space, but I could never have imagined taking it in this direction.
Yes. And so how did you move in the direction of SimplyFed?
Well, I was pregnant with my first daughter when I was working in the federal government at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I was traveling back and forth between Boston and DC and realized this was not going to work as a parent. So we decided to move to rural upstate New York, where I joined at the time the faculty at Cornell, and I had my first daughter. And I saw how hard baby feeding was. I learned that, 85% of women start off breastfeeding, most switch to formula. And the thing is that it shouldn't be an either or, breastfeeding or formula. Most people do both. And for me and my first daughter, I started off breastfeeding, but had a heck of a time. And I saw how hard it was. It was very stigmatizing. I felt like it was a very fragmented system. But I learned that most people do both. But yet there is this shame sometimes that moms feel internally, but also from, I think, the pressure from others that formula feeding is not great. But the thing is, formula feeding is totally great and safe, and it's wonderful for if that's one of your goals. And so it shouldn't be an either or, breastfeeding versus formula. It's whatever works for you as a parent. That's number one. So, but I experienced that firsthand. And secondly, I also learned that breastfeeding support is supposed to be paid for by health plans at no cost to you, but most health plans weren't in compliance with that. So based on my background, working in the federal government, tackling healthcare challenges, working with stakeholders in the system, wanted to really think about how might we redesign this pathway for baby feeding. So one, the folks got support for baby feeding covered by their health plans at no cost to them, as they're supposed to under federal law. But secondly, how could we have a more inclusive system? So it's not a breast is best versus fed is best. There should be no labels. It's whatever works for you as a parent. And so how might we redesign the system to actually meet parents where they're at and allow them to reach their baby feeding goals, whatever those are? And that's why we founded Simply Fed.
Well, I have to ask you a question. How long has support for baby feeding been covered under health insurance? Because I don't remember that being the case. I have 23-year-old twin sons, and I brought in a lactation specialist, at my own expense, our own expense. And so when did that happen? Because I don't remember that being the case. So I don't remember knowing that it could be covered back then.
I'm so glad you're asking this, because this is one of the things that people don't realize that they have access to. So in 2012, under the Affordable Care Act, that federal law required commercial health plans and Medicaid expansion plans to cover breastfeeding support starting during pregnancy at no cost to families. And so that's when it was mandated that it be required by health plans. But it's been around for a while. But until that mandate happened, there was no requirement, so to speak, to cover it. Now, the problem is that no one's enforced that policy, which, really grinds my gears. And so the White House last fall announced that HHS is now going to start enforcing that policy. So to answer your question, it actually hasn't been around for a while, but even in the last 10 years or so that it has been around, no one's been enforcing it. The clinical specialty of lactation support has been around for decades, but if you don't have that reimbursement for it, it's really hard for people to get access to this. And so that's so core to Simply Fed's mission, is really improving access, democratizing access to these baby feeding support, whether you're breastfeeding or formula feeding, covered by your health plans at no cost to you. And our whole goal is, for those that want to breastfeed, we're improving access to this care and service starting during pregnancy, which is so important, so that you get access. And the reason starting during pregnancy is so important, even though breastfeeding and baby feeding feels like a later problem. Fun fact, I'm actually pregnant with my third daughter right now. And
Congratulations.
so oh, thanks. So, I'm going through those prenatal appointment, that regime right now. And yeah, you're so focused on the labor, but like right after the labor, literally seconds after, they hand over the baby and you're like, oh, I have to keep this baby alive now. And if you don't know what to expect with baby feeding, then you feel very lost and confused. You don't know how it works, right? Breastfeeding, while natural, quote unquote, there's nothing natural about it. It takes you working with a trained, certified health professional, like a lactation consultant, that's widely recognized as the gold standard in the medical literature. It really takes a trained health professional to work with you. And it's so important that that training and education happens during pregnancy, so you know what to expect. And the good news is it's covered by health plans. So we like to do a lot of education on, one, you shouldn't be paying for the service out of pocket. And secondly, there's a trained healthcare professional that can work with you starting during pregnancy, so you know what to expect. And that's important, because when a woman doesn't reach her baby feeding expectations, she's much more likely to be diagnosed with postpartum depression. And so we like to start working with folks during pregnancy, set expectations of what it looks like, so that mom and parent and their whole team, their partner, feel prepared.
I agree with the fact that that education really should start during pregnancy. I figured I would be breastfeeding, but I really didn't know a lot about it. And like you said, it started right there in the hospital. I had an awesome nurse who he was the expert in helping moms do this, but that doesn't mean it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. I wish I had known a lot more about it. So I'm glad that you it's covered for people for moms to learn more about this during pregnancy, and that Simply Fed is part of that.
We'll be right back after this. You love your kids. You do your very best for them. But sometimes it feels like it's just not enough. And you're so sure you're the only one who feels this way. The truth is, you're not alone. It is also true that there are some things you're doing quite right. And there's a community who would love to exchange ideas with you. I'm Carol Maletta, creator of the Parenting 411, a portal for parents where I share information parents need through webinars and masterclasses. And not only that, the parents there support each other on this amazing journey in the Parenting 411 community group on Facebook. I can't wait to meet you in the community. And we're back with the Parenting 411.
So, we see moms, in the real world on TV breastfeeding, and it looks just so natural and idyllic. But let's talk about really what new moms can expect during this process trying to breastfeed.
Yeah, one of the things we try to do as a team at Simply Fed is kind of demystify. It's not breastfeeding on a lily pad, surrounded by rainbows. It is hard, 2 a.m., everyone's crying. And there's nothing natural about it, right? It takes practice, and it takes working with a trained health professional to help navigate the twists and turns of it. So, breastfeeding and baby feeding, if breastfeeding is one of your goals, what that looks like in the first week, we try to set expectations. Often it's droplets at first. And if a parent doesn't know that it's droplets at first, it's thimbles full of breast milk, then they think they're failing, when actually they're probably doing awesome. And during that week, it's a lot of hand expression, and again, that takes practice and training. And if you're not working with someone, so in that first week, it's drops. It's a very little amount that your baby needs, and so we like to work with them to make sure a parent knows that they're doing great, but also give them those strategies to make it work. And then you can also, alongside that, continue to work on latching, and breastfeeding shouldn't be painful, but for many it is painful at first. And again, this is why working with a trained health professional is good, because it shouldn't be painful. And if it is, there's someone that can work with you. So setting expectations on amounts in that first week, latching, positioning. For me, positioning was just, I could not get it right. And so I had to work a lot with that lactation consultant, health professional, to figure out what worked for me. And, at Simply Fed, our care is 100% virtually, which a lot of people are confused by, because they're like, don't you need to be elbow to elbow? And 100% elbow to elbow in the clinic care is oh so important. And what's great about virtual is that healthcare professional works with you in your home where you're going to be baby feeding. So the provider will say, let's go to the place you're going to be baby feeding, and let's figure out what pillows, what's your position, let's get those feet up. And that way you do that troubleshooting in your own home setting. We know that pumping is a very important part of the plan for folks, and selecting a pump. And sometimes folks have more than one pump. And fun fact, pumps are supposed to be covered by health plans too. So get that health plan covered. But pumping, a lot of folks don't realize that flange or shield that's used for pumping, there's different sizes. So making sure, again, that you're getting sized properly. And then same thing, if formula feeding is part of that choice and maybe your baby has dropped weight a lot, and you need to supplement, that's okay. And we should do what's best for you always, a mom, both physical and mental health, and also for your baby's health too. And so how do you select the right formula and safe preparation use of formula? And so all these issues, latching, positioning, dealing with pain, selecting a pump, getting size for your pump, selecting a formula and use of formula. These are some of the common issues or questions that we work with parents. And as you can see by all those examples, you don't just get them all answered in that first week. You got to work with someone over time. And that's why a lactation provider is great, because it's a lot like mental health care, a lot like physical therapy. It's really important to have access to ongoing appointments.
Well, I have to tell you something else aside from the actual act of breastfeeding and any types of tools or accessories to help with that. What I found too was that I wasn't prepared for is just how important you need to get plenty of rest, drink plenty of fluids. You need to eat right. Like it's just super important. You would like to be ideally doing those things anyway, but certainly when you have little ones, it's very, and you want to breastfeed. It's so important. That was something else too, that I wasn't prepared for. Just what it took in terms of nutrition and all of that for me to make sure that they got what they needed. So,
well,
now,
and I'm so glad you're saying that, because what you're highlighting is mom matters. Mom's health matters. I think after baby's born, a lot of attention is put on the baby, and mom, we often feel discarded, right? We got all this attention during pregnancy, and then we birth this baby, and then it feels like we're like thrown to the side. And so I love what you're saying. Mom matters, and your health matters, and you need to prioritize your health.
Now let's talk a bit about I don't know how things have changed, but in terms of the length of time that, if you're going to breastfeed, what would be really good? What do doctors recommend? What would they like to see?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say there are the doctor's recommendations, and what's most important is what works for you, period. And doctor's recommendations for length of breastfeeding only are good if mom and your mental health are good. So AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, has recommended exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months and breastfeeding for 2 years. Let me just say, I run a breastfeeding support company. I did not reach either of those goals with either of my kids, and lots of societal reasons for that. And that's okay. So what we know that breastfeeding is great, 100%, lots of benefits for both baby and parent. And you got to do what works best for you. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of folks haven't had access to this health professional support. And so when moms hear those medical recommendations, frankly, it stresses me out just listening to them, right? It just, holy moly. And with 1 in 4 moms, one study shows that 1 in 4 moms are returning back to work within 2 weeks. I mean, that's really hard to think about what that looks like. And again, you need to work with trained health professionals to figure out a plan that works for you, so that if you do have to return to work, how do you get access to pumping equipment, or how do you make a plan that works for you? But first and foremost, there's the medical recommendations, and you need to work with trained healthcare professionals to figure out what works for you based on your goals, but also what is going to help protect your mental and physical health as well.
Yes, I again, I agree with you. And I was able to do 4 months. And then
that's so great.
That was it. I just, yeah, I couldn't. And I'm thankful now that I didn't, I mean, certainly I wanted to make it work and all of that, but I'm glad I didn't feel too ashamed about that. Like, because they were even saying 6 months back then. I just didn't know if things had changed. But in 2 years, that was out of the question. But I'm glad that I didn't let that get me down too much. That it was that I could only do the 4 months. But so now I know you offer a full range of support at Simply Fed. Talk about that and just how you came to decide that like this needs to be done put under one roof and all of that for mothers. This is that important.
Yeah, well, it was so important to us. We had our own lived experiences, and then we spoke with a lot of parents, and we saw from the statistics put out by the CDC, 85% of women start off breastfeeding, most transition to formula at some point. 60% of those 85% wanted to breastfeed for longer, but cite lack of access to support. And we also heard from parents that we need to normalize the both, the combo feeding or formula feeding, and really normalizing whatever works for parent is what's best, because your mental health matters, your physical health matters, and baby's health matters as well. So with all of those factors at play, how do we think what this experience looks like to really not just think about baby-centered care, but also parent and mom-centered care as part of that? And so taking all that together and taking the medical recommendations and putting that in, how do we optimize what works best for the family? And what we came up with was this care experience where we work collaboratively with the healthcare system, where we get referrals from OBs, midwives, other parents, say employers that find out about us, and they're providing access to this benefit for their employees as they think about that transition back to work. We get referrals from folks during pregnancy, and we love to do that prenatal baby feeding education appointment. Do a lot of listening to understand what parents' goals are with baby feeding. And then after baby's born, we continue to provide care 100% virtually from our network of lactation consultant providers that are baby feeding experts, whether you're breastfeeding, formula feeding, combo feeding, pumping, donor milk, G-tube feeding, whatever way you're feeding your baby, they are the experts. And so after baby's born, parents text us via our system and our care experience, continuing on that care journey that they started during pregnancy. And we work with parents in an ongoing way virtually, doing a lot of listening, and then providing them with that evidence-based care from these healthcare professionals, whether that's troubleshooting, latching, positioning, dealing with pain, supply issues, whether that's undersupply or oversupply. I always was an undersupply person. And so working with my provider was so important to figure out how I could increase supply, because that was my goal. And then I quickly started pumping, and I worked with my healthcare professional to select a pump and get size for a pump. And then also introducing formula and combo feeding and what that looks like. And then figuring out what worked for me as my baby got older, right? And they were going through growth spurts, and figuring out sleeping with baby feeding and breastfeeding. And that's a huge pain point. And so that transition back to work, introducing complementary foods, there's all these questions that come up. And so our care experience really mimics that. It's a whole package of services along your baby's first year life and beyond, based on the goals of the parent. And we're, as you've heard, very inclusive, whether you're fully breastfeeding, combo feeding, formula feeding, pumping, donor milk, G-tube feeding, whatever way you're feeding your baby, we meet you where you're at and designing a care plan that works for you. And this whole pathway is covered by health plans at no cost to families.
That's beautiful. And how long would you say on average do mothers continue to work with you? And I guess I'm thinking in terms of how old the child is.
Up to a year, but it very much varies by the parent. We work with folks a lot in that first month or 6 weeks, but then we work with them in an ongoing way, especially surrounding these key milestones, such as that transition back to work or weaning, or traveling for the first time with your baby. That's a huge stressor, and milk storage, and there's just so many things that come up. But it's all based on your needs as a parent.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear how access to support and resources has certainly evolved over the years. And I pretty much became a stay-at-home mom and then an entrepreneur. So I never did go back to a corporate environment. So I am curious about how support and accommodations have evolved in the workplace for breastfeeding moms.
We'll be right back after this. As the saying goes, mother's work is never done, except when it really is. I'm talking about my new book, Mother's Work, Pearls of Wisdom and Gems from My Journey. I share my transformation from an outmanned, overwhelmed mom of twin boys to a parenting strategist and consultant, and being honored as DC Mother of the Year by American Mothers Incorporated. In Mother's Work, I tell you about the 7 guideposts that kept me anchored as I weathered the peaks and valleys of motherhood. Grab your copy at carolmaletta.com/motherswork. And we're back with the Parenting 411.
Yeah, and whether, you're working inside the home or outside the home, it's important that folks know that support is there to design a plan. So we know right now that women are half the workforce. Like wow, right? And by the way, societal infrastructures have not evolved for that. And that's so important, right? Because we are half the workforce. We are an economic engine, and societal infrastructure needs to evolve so that they can support women in the workplace for those that want to be there, right? And for those that want to be there. And so what is exciting is that thanks to this federal legislation requiring health plans to cover breastfeeding support, that there is more access to these health professionals. But again, a lot of people don't know about it. And we know that companies with breastfeeding or lactation support programs retain employees 94% compared to the national average, which is anywhere from 44 to 56%, roughly, depending on where you fall. So providing these types of supports from companies like Simply Fed, we know helps retain women in the workplace. And so companies are keen to put together these programs. And the good news is organizations like Simply Fed work with these organizations to make sure parents know about this so that they can make a plan starting during pregnancy. And then we're there to help support parents postpartum and then during that transition back to work. And again, the good news is these are required to be covered by health plans. So as an example, Simply Fed is now a network with all Aetna commercial health plans. So if your company offers Aetna, and you're on an Aetna health plan, you get access to this support for free for up to 6 appointments. So this is something that we try to do a lot of work with employers to educate them that this is a resource that you don't need to buy extra. It's covered by your health plan. And so, parents, if you're listening to this, reach out to your benefit manager and ask them about services like lactation support services. What do I have access to via my health plan, or come check out Simply Fed's website and share it with them, because this is a resource that's so important to help you as a working parent.
And I just appreciate that you continue to just reiterate that they're entitled to this. They are covered. They should be covered by this, and they need to ask about it and really push for it, because it's the law. So I'm so glad you're reinforcing that. Now, what are 5, practical steps that moms can take to really increase the chances of success in breastfeeding and success the way they define it, whether they want to do it the 6 months or they want to do 2 years? What are some things that they can do to increase the chances?
So some of them are going to be a little surprising. But first, you got to do what's best for you and prioritize your physical and mental health. If you start with that, then everything else comes from that. So make sure that you are doing what's best for you. And whatever your goal is, you need to revisit that is this what's best for me? And because if it works for mom, there's no replacing you as a parent and your mental health. I get like teary thinking about it. And so that's so important. Second, you got to ask for help and advocate for yourself. And this is hard. And so what that means is, to your point just now, is advocating to your employer, advocating for yourself if you don't have access to this support, and making sure that you do via your health plan. And it shouldn't take this, right? It should be easy. And that's what the system change we're trying to create. Third is whomever your partner is or family member that's part of your support infrastructure, involve them and make sure they know they're part of the team too. Just because you're breastfeeding doesn't mean they're not part of the baby feeding team. We hear from dads and partners a lot that they feel helpless. Well, dads, and hopefully some dads are listening too, or if they're not, mom, arm them with this. Dads, you're part of the baby feeding team. So what does this mean? This means bottles. You can help out with cleaning bottles. Secondly, breast pump parts. You can clean breast pump parts. That's a huge burden on mom to take that. It takes a lot of time. I think I calculated it. It's 40 hours worth of work over the year if you're pumping and cleaning all of those pump parts, not the pumping alone, just the cleaning of the pumping parts. Dad, you can, or partner, you can reach out to organizations like Simply Fed and book appointments for your partner and making sure it's covered. Also, if you are using bottles, you can be part of the feedings in the middle of the night. It's not all up to parent, whether that is in that bottle is formula or breast milk, you can be part of that. Fourth, is making sure, along with taking care of yourself, that you are really taking care of your nutrition and your mental health. And lactation consultants are only one part of your perinatal care team, right? There's pelvic floor physical therapists. And I'm sure you're asking, why are you talking about pelvic floor physical therapists when you asked about breastfeeding support? Because the thing is, if you and your health aren't put together, then you have no hope of reaching your goals for baby feeding. And maybe there's doulas, and doulas more and more are covered by health plans. Pelvic floor PTs are supposed to be covered by health plans. There's a lot of members of this perinatal care team that can work alongside lactation consultants and your OB and your pediatricians. And then, fifth, I'm finally getting to some breastfeeding baby tips. But is, really work with that healthcare professional like a lactation consultant to make sure that you're reaching your goals, that you are, it is not painful. It shouldn't be painful. And that you have access to the tools and equipment and the mindsets and the trainings and education you need to accomplish whatever your goal is.
Thank you. And thank you so much for mentioning other people who play a role on the perinatal team. I think that's important as well. And then just you're always circling back to the mental health of the mother, because I think, parents, friends, other people, they mean well, but they do not realize how important it is for mama to have peace.
Yes.
And how important that is for the baby, that mom has peace. About as she's trying to figure this out, how she's going to care for them overall, certainly how she's going to feed them. That is so important. And so I think that, Simply Fed and all of the professionals that you mentioned really kind of come together to really put mom at ease with how she's going to move forward. So I'm really grateful that you all are around. Can you tell mothers how they can follow you, whether it's on social media, your website, and just stay up to date on all the things that you all are doing?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking this. So, come check us out. Simply Fed always wants to autocorrect to simplify, but it's SimpliFed. And you can come to our website, simplyfed.com. You can find us on Instagram at SimplyFedBaby. And you can text us, and you can text, 411 parenting to 888-458-1364. And that number is 888-458-1364. And we'll get you squared away with an appointment or access to our free classes.
Okay. And I just want to make sure for those who are listening, it's SIMPLIFED.com.
You got it.
So thank you again. And I just pray that, moms are listening, and there's so much valuable information that you shared about resources, but also encouragement. So thank you very much for that. Continue to follow the Parenting 411 on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at the Parenting 411. And remember, it's never too late to be the parent you want to be.